At our monthly Sunday lunch, my daughter looked me dead in the eye and said, "Get out. You're a burden." In the house my husband and I built, the one I poured my life into, I gathered my things silent, but something shifted inside me that day. You won't believe what happened next. Like, share and tell us where you were listening from. Eleanor sat at the polished mahogany dining table, the scent of her carefully prepared pot roast filling the air, yet it offered no comfort against the chill emanating from her daughter Vivian. It was their monthly Sunday lunch, a tradition Eleanor had clung to since Edward, her beloved husband, passed away 2 years prior. What was once a joyous gathering filled with laughter and easy conversation had slowly devolved into a tense, almost ritualistic ordeal. Today, the tension was particularly thick, palpable enough to cut with a dull knife. Vivian sat opposite, her posture rigid, eyes darting everywhere but at her mother. Arthur, Eleanor's son-in-law, picked nervously at his food, attempting to project an air of normalcy that utterly failed. "This pot roast is a bit dry, don't you think, Arthur?" Vivian's voice, sharp and dismissive, sliced through the quiet. Eleanor flinched slightly. She had spent hours preparing the meal, choosing the best cut of meat, seasoning it to perfection. Just as Edward used to love it. She had even used his old recipe. "Oh, it's fine, Viv," Arthur mumbled, his gaze fixed on his plate. He glanced at Eleanor, a fleeting look of apology in his eyes. "No, it's really not. And these potatoes," Vivian continued, pushing a forkful around her plate, "they're a bit bland. You know I prefer mine creamier, Mom." Eleanor felt a familiar knot tightening in her stomach. "I could get some more butter, Vivian, or perhaps a little more salt," she offered gently, trying to diffuse the situation to keep the peace. Vivian scoffed, a short, sharp sound. "Don't bother. It's fine. We'll just eat what's here." The dismissal was absolute, a door slammed shut on any attempt at reconciliation or shared effort. Eleanor knew better than to push. She had learned over these past 2 years that Vivian rarely accepted help, especially if it implied her mother could improve something Vivian had already criticized. Arthur, clearly uncomfortable, cleared his throat. "So, Eleanor, how was your week? Did you finally get that tricky rosebush trimmed?" He tried to inject a lighter note to bridge the growing chasm between mother and daughter. Before Eleanor could answer, Vivian cut him off, her voice suddenly louder, more decisive. "Arthur, that's not important right now. We need to talk to Mom about something." She turned her gaze to Eleanor, her eyes cold, devoid of the warmth Eleanor remembered from her childhood. "Arthur and I have made a decision." A prickle of unease ran down Eleanor's spine. Vivian's tone, the way she had prepared for this, it felt ominous. Eleanor's heart began to thrum in anxious rhythm. "A decision? About what, dear?" she asked, her voice thin. Vivian took a deep breath, as if bracing herself, though Eleanor felt it was meant to brace her. "Mom, you need to find somewhere else to live. We're done." The words hung in the air, a physical weight that pressed down on Eleanor. The comfortable dining room, the familiar sounds of the old house, all seemed to blur. Done? What did she mean, done? "What are you talking about, Vivian? This is my house. Where would I go?" The protest spilled out, raw and immediate, born of pure shock and disbelief. This couldn't be happening. Not here, not now, not from her own daughter. Vivian's expression remained impassive, almost clinical. "Mom, we've been over this. It's not your house. Not legally, not since Dad died." She paused, letting the implications sink in. "Remember, Edward put it in my name before he passed. To protect it, to make things simpler." Eleanor remembered. Edward had been so worried about future estate taxes, about probate. He had trusted Vivian implicitly, believed she would always look after her mother. "He put it in your name for security, Vivian. So I would always have a roof over my head. He meant for me to live here, always." Eleanor's voice rose, desperation creeping in. "That was then, Mom. This is now," Vivian countered, her voice icy. "Things have changed. Arthur and I need our space. You're a burden, Mom. Frankly, you're a freeloader. You don't contribute anything." The accusation stung worse than any physical blow. A burden? A freeloader? Eleanor stared at her daughter, the woman she had raised, for whom she had sacrificed so much. The countless sleepless nights, the unpaid tuition bills, the endless emotional support during Vivian's turbulent teenage years. Eleanor had put her own dreams on hold, worked extra jobs, gone without, all for Vivian. And now she was a burden. I need you out by tonight, Mom, Vivian stated, sealing the pronouncement with a finality that brooked no argument. Arthur finally looked up, his face etched with discomfort. Tonight, Viv? That's a bit sudden, isn't it? Maybe we could give her a few days. Vivian shot him a glare, a silent command that instantly silenced him. Arthur's weak protest died in his throat, replaced by a defeated slump of his shoulders. Eleanor sat immobile, her mind reeling. Tonight, she had nowhere to go, no plans, no belongings packed. It was all happening too fast, a cruel, relentless wave washing over her. Then Vivian rose from the table, her movements sharp and deliberate. She walked directly to Eleanor's small bedroom, the one Eleanor had occupied since Edward's passing, claiming she needed more space in the master. Eleanor heard the rustle of clothes, the clatter of hangers, and then a horrifying spectacle unfolded. Vivian returned, arms laden with Eleanor's most cherished garments, her favorite woolen sweater Edward had bought her comfortable walking shoes, a worn but beloved floral dress. With a disdainful grunt, Vivian walked to the front door, flung it open, and hurled Eleanor's clothes onto the freshly manicured lawn. The colors scattered like fallen leaves against the green grass. The front door, usually a sanctuary, was now a gateway to public humiliation. Mrs. Schmidt, Eleanor's nosy neighbor from across the street, was already out tending her begonias, her head snapping up at the commotion. Other neighbors might be watching too, Eleanor realized with a fresh wave of shame. Just disappear from our lives. Vivian's voice, raw with anger, echoed across the quiet street, a final, brutal pronouncement. We don't want you here anymore. Eleanor, her vision blurred with unshed tears, rose slowly from the table. Every muscle in her body screamed in protest, but she moved with a quiet dignity she didn't know she possessed. She walked out of the house, past her daughter, who stood glowering by the open door, and began to silently gather her belongings from the lawn. Each item she picked up felt heavy, imbued with the weight of her shattered dreams and broken heart. Arthur, his face pale and eyes full of a pathetic regret, came outside. Eleanor, I'm so sorry, he whispered, his voice barely audible. I really am. I tried. I couldn't stop her. Eleanor didn't look at him. She just nodded, a slight, almost imperceptible movement, and continued to stuff her few possessions into a small travel bag she found in the storage closet by the garage. She got into her old car, a reliable but unglamorous sedan, its engine turning over with a familiar groan. As she drove away from the house that had been her home for 40 years, past the now open front door, past the cold face of her daughter, Eleanor felt a profound, heartbreaking emptiness. But beneath the crushing weight of betrayal and sorrow, a tiny, unfamiliar spark ignited within her, a spark of resolve. Eleanor found herself nestled, or perhaps more accurately, crammed into a small, modest apartment within the Golden Age senior living complex. It was a stark contrast to the spacious, comforting home she had shared with Edward for 40 years, the one Vivian had so ruthlessly claimed. The walls were painted a neutral, unimaginative beige, and the furniture, though functional, lacked any personal touch. Eleanor had managed to bring only a handful of cherished items, a faded photograph of Edward, a worn quilt her grandmother had made, and a small, delicate porcelain bird that used to sit on her bedroom dresser. The silence in the apartment was heavy, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator or the distant murmuring from other residents. Her heart felt like a crumpled piece of paper, tossed aside and forgotten. Yet beneath the pain, that tiny spark of resolve from yesterday flickered, refusing to be extinguished. A gentle knock interrupted her melancholy thoughts. It was Beatrice, her oldest and dearest friend, a woman whose loyalty had been a constant through all of Eleanor's life seasons. Beatrice entered, her arms laden with a casserole dish and a bag of groceries. Her face, etched with worry lines but radiating warmth, was a welcome sight. "Eleanor, my dear," Beatrice cooed, her voice soft and sympathetic. "I brought your favorite shepherd's pie. You need to eat something." She set the dish on the small dining table, the aroma of savory lamb and creamy potatoes filling the tiny space. Eleanor offered a weak smile. "Thank you, Bea. You're always so thoughtful." She hadn't realized how hungry she was until the scent hit her. As Beatrice bustled around setting out plates, Eleanor felt the dam inside her begin to crack. I can't believe it, Bea," Eleanor began, her voice trembling slightly as Beatrice gently urged her to take a seat. My own daughter. After everything, to be thrown out like that, like I was nothing. She picked at her food, a sudden surge of emotion making it difficult to swallow. Beatrice reached across the table, taking Eleanor's hand in her own, her touch firm and reassuring. I know, honey, it's cruel, absolutely reprehensible, but you're stronger than you think. You always have been. Eleanor leaned back, a sigh escaping her. I gave her everything, Bea. After Edward died, when she was struggling with her bills, I used my savings to help her pay off her student loans. Then, when she wanted to open that ill-fated boutique, I took out a second mortgage on the house, our house, to give her the capital. She promised to pay it back, of course, but it never happened. Edward had left me a decent life insurance policy, and I made sure she never wanted for anything. I just wanted her to be happy, to succeed. Her voice broke, the memories of her sacrifices, now seemingly in vain, weighing heavily on her. She never once offered to help with the house, not even with the utility bills these last 2 years. She just took. Beatrice listened patiently, her eyes never leaving Eleanor's face. And look where that got you, my dear. Out on the street, with Vivian calling you a burden. She squeezed Eleanor's hand. Sometimes love isn't enough to make someone appreciate you. Sometimes they need a wake-up call. And sometimes, Beatrice continued, her gaze sharpening, you need to remind them that you're not as helpless as they think. Eleanor met her friend's gaze, a flicker of understanding passing between them. Beatrice knew. She always had. What are you implying, Bea? Eleanor asked, though a part of her already knew the answer. Beatrice smiled faintly. I'm implying, my dear, that perhaps it's time you revealed something she doesn't know. Something you've been holding on to for far too long. Eleanor's heart gave it a lurch. She hesitated for a moment. Then, with a newfound resolve that surprised even herself, she pushed away her plate. She walked to the small built-in bookshelf that served as her only storage unit and reached for a worn, dark leather portfolio, tucked away behind a collection of old photo albums. Its surface was soft with age, the stitching frayed in places. This wasn't just a portfolio, it was a vault of secrets, a testament to Edward's foresight and Eleanor's promise. She brought it back to the table and, with a deep breath, unclasped the brass buckle. Inside, carefully organized, were financial statements, old tax documents, and property deeds, their edges softened by time. Edward, she began, her voice steadier now. He inherited 5 acres of land from his eccentric Aunt Martha years ago, long before Vivian was even born. She pulled out a faded deed, tracing the antiquated script with her finger. It was way out in the sticks back then, just undeveloped scrub land. Everyone thought it was worthless. Beatrice peered at the document, her brow furrowing. 5 acres? Where was this exactly? Eleanor pointed to an old map sketched on one of the documents, just beyond what's now the city's eastern boundary. Edward made me promise not to tell Vivian about it, not until she was mature enough to handle such an asset responsibly. He saw a glimpse of her impulsiveness even then, her tendency to spend without thinking. Beatrice nodded slowly. Edward was a wise man. Indeed, Eleanor said, a bittersweet smile touching her lips. And that worthless scrubland, Bea, it's not so worthless anymore. The city has been expanding rapidly eastward for the last decade. Development, new housing, a shopping complex even. That land is now prime real estate. She looked at Beatrice, her eyes holding a glint of steel. I've been getting calls for years, offers. The last one, just a few months ago, was for over $2 million. Beatrice's jaw dropped. Her eyes widened and she gasped, a hand flying to her mouth. $2 million? Eleanor, are you serious? $2 million? The disbelief in her voice was absolute, bordering on awe. Eleanor nodded, a slow, deliberate movement. More than serious. That's what the appraisal said. And the offers have only increased since, Washam. She paused, her gaze distant, reflecting on the past. I kept it quiet, not just because of Edward's promise, but because Vivian. She's always had a knack for making bad financial decisions. Remember when she blew her entire inheritance from Uncle Henry on that speculative tech stock that went bankrupt? Or how she racked up credit card debt buying designer clothes for that boutique that failed within a year? If she knew about this land, she'd blow through it faster than you could blink. She'd see it as a bottomless well, not an investment, not a responsibility. Eleanor closed the portfolio with a soft snap, the sound echoing in the small apartment. Her face, which had been etched with sorrow and exhaustion, now held a newfound firmness. Edward wanted her to be mature before she knew. "Well," she said, her voice hardening with quiet conviction, "I think it's abundantly clear now that Vivian will never be ready. And I," she declared, looking at Beatrice with eyes that now gleamed with resolve, "am done waiting for her to be." The very next morning, armed with a new sense of purpose and the unwavering support of Beatrice, Eleanor made her way to the stately, old-fashioned offices of Davison and Sons law firm. Mr. Davison, a man whose silver hair matched his sharp intellect, had been Edward's closest friend and trusted legal counsel for decades. He greeted Eleanor with a somber, understanding expression, having already heard whispers of her predicament through the town's efficient grapevine. "Eleanor, my dear," he said, his voice laced with genuine concern as he settled her into the plush leather chair opposite his desk. "I was so terribly sorry to hear what happened. Are you quite all right? I'm afraid the news travels fast in this town." Eleanor offered him a weak but resolute smile. "I'm as well as can be expected, Charles. Thank you. But I didn't come here to lament. I came here to change my will." Mr. Davison raised an eyebrow, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. He knew Eleanor's long-standing will, meticulously crafted by Edward and himself years ago, which primarily left everything to Vivian. "Of course, Eleanor, but before we delve into that, may I just say, I always had reservations about Edward placing the house in Vivian's name. It was an unusual move, even for estate planning." Eleanor sighed, a ghost of her former pain passing over her features. "Edward meant well, Charles. He thought it would simplify things, protect the asset, ensure I always had a home. He never imagined Vivian would, well, that she would do what she did." She paused, collecting herself. "But that's in the past. We must look to the future." She then launched into her new wishes, her voice firm, unwavering. "First, Charles, I want the bulk of my estate, including the proceeds from the sale of the 5 acres, to go to charitable causes. Specifically, I want to establish a foundation dedicated to helping abandoned and vulnerable elderly individuals, a place that provides them with dignity, a safe home, and the care they deserve so no one else has to experience what I did." Mr. Davison listened, his expression shifting from concern to a quiet admiration. He took careful notes, his pen scratching rhythmically across the pad. "A noble cause, Eleanor, a truly worthy legacy. Secondly, Eleanor continued, I want to set aside a portion, a significant one, for my grandson Leo. He's a bright boy, Charles, with a kind heart, not like his mother." Her voice softened slightly. "I want to ensure he has the opportunity for a good education, whatever path he chooses. This will be an education fund, to be controlled by a trustee, of course. Someone responsible, who will ensure the funds are used solely for his schooling and future development. He shouldn't suffer for his mother's choices." Mr. Davison nodded. "Understood. We'll establish a robust trust with clear guidelines." "And for Vivian?" he asked, his gaze direct. Eleanor's lips pressed into a thin line. "For Vivian, I want a modest amount. Enough for a down payment on a small apartment, perhaps, but it must come with specific conditions." She leaned forward, her eyes narrowing slightly. "She is to receive the funds only if she can prove she has completed a financial literacy course, a certified, reputable one. And the funds are to be paid out monthly, in small increments, directly to the landlord or mortgage company, not to her directly. If she defaults on her own rent or mortgage, the payments from the fund cease immediately and revert to the charitable foundation. No lump sums, no access to the capital. This is not a gift for her to squander. Charles, it's a safety net, one she will have to work for." Mr. Davison's pen paused. He looked at Eleanor, a hint of surprise in his eyes, but also a deep understanding. "Eleanor, these are stringent conditions. Are you absolutely certain?" "Absolutely," Eleanor affirmed, her voice resolute. "She needs to learn responsibility. Perhaps this is the only way." Over the next hour, Mr. Davison meticulously drafted the new will, his legal mind working swiftly to incorporate Eleanor's instructions with precision and clarity. As he read out the various clauses and stipulations, a profound sense of relief washed over Eleanor. It was as if a heavy weight she hadn't realized she was carrying had finally been lifted. The pain was still there, a dull ache in her heart, but it was now accompanied by a surge of empowerment. She was reclaiming her agency, redefining her legacy on her own terms. When the document was nearing completion, Eleanor had one more request. Charles, she said, once this is finalized, I want you to send a copy of the amended will to Vivian. Not the full details, mind you, just enough to show that her inheritance has been significantly revised, enough for her to understand that things have changed. Mr. Davison looked up, his expression thoughtful. Eleanor, are you sure that's wise? It could provoke a rather strong reaction. Perhaps it would be better to simply let her discover it in due course. Eleanor shook her head, her gaze firm. No, Charles, it's necessary. She needs to know now. She needs to understand that actions have consequences. This isn't about revenge. It's about holding her accountable. And perhaps, just perhaps, it might be the only thing that gets through to her. I want her to know that the game has changed. Mr. Davison held her gaze for a moment, then slowly nodded. Very well, Eleanor. If that is your wish, I will ensure it is done. It will be an interesting development, to say the least. He gave her a small, knowing smile. Eleanor signed the new will, her hand steady, feeling a quiet satisfaction blossom in her chest. She had been cast out, deemed worthless, but she was far from it. She was Eleanor, and she was just getting started. 2 days after her visit to Mr. Davison, Eleanor was enjoying a rare moment of peace, sipping a cup of herbal tea in her small apartment when her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, an unrecognized number. Usually she lets such calls go to voicemail, but something compelled her to answer. Hello, she said, her voice cautious. A moment of silence, then a voice, startlingly familiar yet utterly alien in its tone. Mom, is that you? It was Vivian. Her voice was controlled, almost sweet, a honeyed veneer that Eleanor hadn't heard in years. It was the voice Vivian used when she wanted something or when she was trying to manipulate. Eleanor's grip tightened on the phone. Vivian, to what do I owe this surprise? There was no masking the coolness in her tone. Mom, I've been trying to reach you. Your old number was disconnected, and I was so worried, Vivian exclaimed, a manufactured urgency in her voice. Anyway, I just wanted to apologize for the other day. I really overreacted. It's just been so stressful lately with Arthur's job and everything. You know how it is. Eleanor listened, a cynical smile playing on her lips. Overreacted? Stress? Those words were far too mild to describe being thrown out of her own home, her clothes tossed onto the lawn like rubbish. She knew this wasn't a genuine apology. It was a prelude to something else, something Vivian wanted. I see, Eleanor replied, her voice flat. And I suppose the package you received from Mr. Davison's office has absolutely nothing to do with this sudden change of heart. A beat of stunned silence on the other end, then a sharp intake of breath. The honeyed tone faltered, replaced by a strained indignation. What? Oh, that, yes. Well, that's what I wanted to talk about, Mom. I mean, 5 acres? $2 million? Why on earth did you never tell me about this, Mom? All these years you let me struggle. You let me think we were barely getting by. And you had this secret? Vivian's voice began to rise, the carefully constructed sweetness dissolving into genuine outrage. Eleanor closed her eyes for a moment, picturing Vivian's indignant face. The transparency was almost comical, if it weren't so painful. Tell you about it, Vivian? Eleanor echoed, her voice quiet but firm. Would it have made a difference? Would knowing about a potential fortune have altered your treatment of me? Would it have stopped you from calling me a burden, a freeloader, and throwing me out onto the street? Vivian spluttered, momentarily at a loss for words. Of course it would have. Mom, how can you even ask that? I love you. You're my mother. I wouldn't have done what I did if I knew you had that kind of money. We could have been a family again. We could have bought a new house, a bigger house. We could have gone on trips. The true motive, cloaked in a flimsy veil of familial affection, was now laid bare. It wasn't about love, it was about the money. Oh, Eleanor's voice was dry, devoid of emotion. So my worth, my place in your life is contingent upon my financial assets? Is that what you're saying? No, of course not. Vivian quickly backtracked, scrambling to regain her composure. Mom, you know that's not what I meant. I'm worried about you, out there, all alone. It's not right. Listen, why don't you come over for dinner tonight? I'll make your favorite. Pot roast, just like you used to make it. And we can talk, really talk about everything, about us. Eleanor's mind drifted back to the image of her own pot roast, criticized and dismissed just days before. The irony was almost too much to bear. She remembered a time when Vivian truly did adore her, when her daughter's face would light up at her presence, when a shared meal was simply a shared meal, not a calculated maneuver. When had that changed? When had she, Eleanor, transitioned from being a loving mother to an inconvenient obstacle, a burden to be discarded until she became a potential source of wealth? The shift had been subtle, insidious, fueled by Vivian's escalating sense of entitlement and financial woes. She thought of Leo, her grandson, and the future she wanted to secure for him. She thought of the abandoned elderly and the dignity she wanted to restore. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about standing firm, about showing Vivian that her manipulative tactics would no longer work. "I'll think about it, Vivian," Eleanor finally said, her voice betraying none of the turmoil she felt. She needed time to formulate her next move, to ensure her plan was executed with precision. "Please do, Mom. We miss you. Leo misses you," Vivian pleaded, layering on the guilt. Eleanor ended the call, a quiet sigh escaping her lips. She placed the phone down, her gaze fixed on the small, framed photograph of Edward on her bedside table. Money changes people, she thought, a bitter taste in her mouth. It had certainly changed Vivian, but it had also, unexpectedly, galvanized Eleanor. The bait had been cast, and Vivian had bitten. Now, it was time to reel her in. If you're finding this story as gripping as I am, don't miss a single moment of what happens next. Make sure to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to stay updated with all the future twists. Eleanor arrived at her former home precisely at 7 o'clock, the appointed time for dinner. The house, which once felt so welcoming, now loomed before her, a beautifully maintained monument to a past life. As she approached the front door, it swung open and Vivian appeared, her face wreathed in an expression of overly sweet enthusiasm that grated on Eleanor's nerves. "Mom, you came! I'm so glad!" Vivian exclaimed, her voice bright and falsely effusive. She even attempted a hug, which Eleanor stiffly evaded. The dining room, visible from the entryway, was elaborately set, a pristine white tablecloth, polished silverware, and flickering candles created an atmosphere of forced festivity, a stark contrast to the casual Sunday lunches of old. Even the pot roast, simmering enticingly on the stove, seemed like a prop in a carefully staged play. Arthur stood awkwardly by the dining table, his gaze fixed on the intricate pattern of the rug beneath his feet. He looked profoundly ashamed, his usual quiet demeanor amplified by his discomfort. "Hello, Eleanor," he mumbled, a barely audible greeting. Leo, Eleanor's grandson, was conspicuously absent. Eleanor instinctively knew he had been deliberately sent away, removed from the impending drama. Come in, come in! Have a seat," Vivian urged, gesturing dramatically towards the table. "Can I get you some wine, Mom? I opened that lovely Cabernet you like." Eleanor shook her head, her expression impassive. "No thank you, Vivian. I think I need a clear head tonight." Vivian's smile wavered for a fraction of a second, but she quickly recovered. "Of course, Mom, whatever you wish." She sat down, her posture rigid, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "Mom, I really wanted to talk tonight. I've been so distraught since the other day. I truly am sorry for what I said, for how I acted. It was wrong. I was just so stressed, and I wasn't thinking clearly." Eleanor listened patiently, her gaze steady on Vivian. "Stressed, Vivian? Or were you simply inconvenienced by my presence? Were your apologies, then, a reaction to genuine remorse, or to the contents of the document Mr. Davison sent you?" Vivian flinched, her carefully constructed facade beginning to crack. "Mom, how can you say that? I've been worried sick about you." "Worried enough to contact my lawyer 5 times within hours of receiving that partial will, Vivian?" Eleanor asked, her voice calm but penetrating. "Mr. Davison informed me. You were quite insistent, apparently. Not about my well-being, but about the extent of the property, the legality of the will, and whether I truly had such an asset." Arthur's head snapped up, a bewildered expression on his face as he stared at Vivian. Vivian flushed crimson. "I was just confused, Mom, and upset that you kept something so big from me. Upset that I kept a secret. Or upset that your perception of my helplessness was shattered?" Eleanor countered, her voice unwavering. Which was the true shock, Vivian? The discovery of the property or the realization that your burden of a mother actually held a significant asset? Vivian's composure completely crumbled. Her eyes darted from Eleanor to Arthur, then back to her plate. Mom, that's not fair. You don't understand what Arthur and I have been going through. We've been struggling, really struggling, with the rising costs of everything and Arthur's modest salary. It's been incredibly hard to maintain this house, keep up with appearances. She rattled off a list of financial struggles that Eleanor knew were actually luxury expenses, their expensive new car payments, the extravagant annual family vacations, from which Eleanor was always excluded, Vivian's never-ending shopping sprees for designer clothes, and her frequent visits to high-end spas. Eleanor listened impassively, a cold certainty settling in her heart. Struggles, Vivian? Eleanor finally interrupted, her voice gaining a quiet force. Is that what you call a $27,000 credit card debt, all racked up in the last year? For clothes you barely wear, spa treatments, and that girl's trip to Vegas you took last month? The words hung in the air, sharp and unsparing. Arthur gasped, his face draining of color. He turned slowly to Vivian, his eyes wide with shock and betrayal. $27,000? Vivian, what is she talking about? I thought we agreed to cut down on expenses. You told me you were paying off your cards. Vivian looked as if she'd been struck, her face paling. Mom, how do you know about that? That's private. When you entrust your financial affairs to someone like Mr. Davison, Vivian, certain things come to light, Eleanor explained, her voice devoid of triumph, only a deep weariness. And those struggles you mentioned, they were precisely why I kept the land a secret. Your pattern of reckless spending, your inability to distinguish between needs and wants. Edward knew it, and I've seen it firsthand for years. Then Eleanor delivered the final blow. But it goes deeper than that, doesn't it, Vivian? This sudden need to have me out. It wasn't just about me being a burden, was it? It was about your plan for a home equity loan, wasn't it? To cover that debt, perhaps, and other luxuries. A loan that required me to be gone so the bank wouldn't question an elderly occupant with no legal claim. A loan you couldn't get with me still living here, complicating the asset. The dining room descended into a stunned silence. Arthur stared at Vivian, his face a mask of dawning horror and rage. Vivian, defeated, had shrunk into her chair, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and mortification. The carefully constructed dinner, the feigned apologies, the elaborate table setting, it all collapsed, exposing the raw, ugly truth beneath. Eleanor rose slowly from the table, a profound sadness settling over her, heavier than any anger. I think I've had enough for tonight, she said, her voice quiet. She turned and walked towards the front door. Arthur, still reeling, quickly followed her. Eleanor, wait, I am so sorry. I didn't know any of it. His voice was choked with genuine regret. Eleanor stopped at the door, turning to face him. No, Arthur, you didn't. But you enabled it, didn't you? By staying silent, by letting her run roughshod over me, over you. She gave him a look of sorrowful understanding. Perhaps this is a wake-up call for both of you. As she walked out into the cool night air, leaving the wreckage of the dinner behind her, Eleanor felt a quiet determination solidify within her. The sadness remained, but it was tempered by the firm resolve that she had made the right choice and that she would not be swayed. 2 weeks had passed since the disastrous dinner, and Eleanor had slowly begun to settle into her new routine at the Golden Age Senior Living Complex. Her small apartment, though still sparse, was beginning to feel more like home, adorned with a few more personal touches and the comforting presence of Beatrice's frequent visits. The quiet determination she'd felt that night had solidified into a calm resolve. She gardened in the communal plot, joined a book club, and even started painting again, a hobby she'd abandoned years ago. She was finding peace, a sense of independence she hadn't realized she'd lost. Then the phone rang. It was Sorvero. It was Arthur. His voice, when she answered, was strained, almost hoarse with exhaustion and despair. Eleanor, he began, without preamble, I had to call you. They're worse than I thought, much worse. Eleanor's heart sank, a familiar ache returning to her chest. What is it, Arthur? After you left, Vivian and I had it out, he confessed, his voice trembling. She confessed to some of the credit card debt, but it was just the tip of the iceberg. I did some digging. She has multiple personal loans I knew nothing about, online shopping accounts she's maxed out. She even took $8,000 from Leo's college fund. Eleanor. $8,000. She said it was temporary to cover some bills, but it's gone. She blew it on more clothes and another weekend trip to a spa with her friends. Eleanor listened in stunned silence, a cold wave washing over her. Taking money from Leo's college fund was a new low, even for Vivian. It confirmed every fear Edward had ever harbored about his daughter's financial irresponsibility, and then some. The anger she felt was not for herself, but for her innocent grandson. I confronted her, Eleanor, Arthur continued, his voice cracking. I told her I can't do this anymore, that I'm considering divorce. She broke down. But then, almost immediately, she rallied. She's still fixated on that property, Eleanor, the 5 acres. She keeps saying it's her birthright, that Dad meant for it to be hers. She's talking about contesting your new will. She says you're not in your right mind, that you're mentally incompetent, suffering from grief and old age. The accusation hit Eleanor with a jolt. Mentally incompetent? The audacity, the sheer nerve of her daughter was breathtaking. Eleanor, who was more lucid and determined than she had been in years, all thanks to Vivian's own cruel actions. Thank you, Arthur, Eleanor said, her voice surprisingly steady despite the tremor in her hands. For telling me. For Leo's sake, you have to do what's right. As soon as she hung up, Eleanor immediately dialed Mr. Davison. He answered on the second ring. She relayed Arthur's call, the revelation about Leo's fund, and Vivian's threat to contest the will. Charles, I need to ensure this new will is watertight, Eleanor stated firmly. Vivian's claims of my incompetence are baseless, and I want to be prepared for any legal challenge she might mount. Understood, Eleanor, Mr. Davison replied, his tone grim. We'll ensure all the necessary affidavits are in place, perhaps even a recent medical assessment to confirm your mental acuity. We'll be ready. A few days later, Vivian, seemingly desperate, called Eleanor again, requesting a coffee meeting. Eleanor, keen to gauge the extent of her daughter's desperation and manipulative tactics, agreed. She met Vivian at a small, unassuming coffee shop, far from their usual haunts. Vivian looked disheveled, her hair unkempt, her eyes shadowed with exhaustion and what looked like genuine distress. The veneer of sweetness was gone, replaced by a raw vulnerability that, for a fleeting moment, almost tugged at Eleanor's heartstrings. Mom, Vivian began, her voice hoarse. Arthur, he's threatening to leave me. He says he's going to file for divorce. Tears welled in her eyes. He found out about some other things. He says I've been irresponsible, that I've ruined our family. Eleanor watched her expression unreadable. She felt a profound sadness for the woman Vivian had become, but also a steely resolve not to be swayed by false tears. And I suppose that's Arthur's fault too, isn't it, Vivian? Eleanor finally said, her voice quiet but firm. Just like your financial issues, your mounting debt, and your inability to manage money are also his fault. Vivian gasped, a fresh wave of tears spilling down her cheeks. It's not fair, Mom. He makes a decent salary, but he's so tight-fisted. He never wants me to have anything nice. He just doesn't understand. I just wanted to feel good about myself, Mom, to have nice things like everyone else. Eleanor leaned forward, her gaze unwavering. Vivian, you didn't just want nice things. You lied, you hid debt, and now you've stooped to stealing from your own son's future. $8,000 from Leo's college fund. Do you have any idea what that means for him? How utterly selfish that is? Vivian recoiled, her face paling even further. How? How do you know about that? The question was less of an accusation and more of a panicked plea. It doesn't matter how I know, Vivian. What matters is that I do know. And Arthur knows. And it just confirms everything Edward feared. Everything I've suspected for years. You are not capable of managing significant assets responsibly. You prioritize fleeting luxuries over your family's financial security, even your son's education. Vivian wrung her hands, her eyes darting around the coffee shop, seeking an escape. Mom, please. This is all a misunderstanding. Can't we just work something out? About the property, if I had access to that money, things would be different. I could pay off my debts. I could save my marriage. We could be a family again, Mom. You could move back home. We could put this all behind us. She was trying to negotiate, her desperation evident. The property, the money, was still her primary focus, a lifeline she believed would solve all her problems. Eleanor merely shook her head, a deep sorrow settling in her heart. Vivian, there's nothing to work out regarding the property. It's not yours. It never was in the way you think. And it won't be until you truly understand the value of responsibility, honesty, and family beyond its financial implications. Eleanor met Vivian's desperate plea with a firm, unwavering gaze. Vivian, I want nothing from you. No apologies, no false promises. What I do want, however, is for you to finally be honest, both with yourself and with me. It's time we both face the truth. Vivian, still trying to regain some semblance of control, began another attempt at a manipulative narrative. Mom, if you just understood, if you just helped me, everything could go back to normal. We could be a family. No, Vivian, Eleanor interrupted, her voice clear and cutting through the desperate pleas. Normal left when you threw me out of my home. Normal left when you called me a burden. And it certainly left when you started scheming to declare me mentally incompetent to claim what you believe is rightfully yours. Vivian's mouth dropped open. She was momentarily speechless, her face a mask of shock. How did you know? She stammered, her voice barely a whisper. The carefully constructed desperation in her eyes transformed into raw anger. Who told you? That's irrelevant, Eleanor said, holding her gaze. What matters is that I know, and I know you're planning to contest my will, claiming I'm not of sound mind. Am I correct? The question was a direct hit, a final shattering of Vivian's pretense, her face contorted with rage, all vulnerability vanishing. Of course I am. This isn't fair, Mom. That property should be mine. Dad meant for me to have it. It's family land. How can you just give it away to strangers? To some obscure charity? What about your family? Eleanor merely shook her head, a deep well of disappointment swirling within her. Vivian, family is not a word you get to use so lightly after what you've done. My will benefits those who actually need it, the abandoned elderly, who deserve dignity and care. It establishes a secure future for Leo, ensuring his education is never jeopardized by your recklessness. And for you, Vivian, there is a conditional trust. A modest amount, but contingent on you taking responsibility for your actions, learning financial literacy, and proving you can manage your life without squandering every penny. A conditional trust? For me, Vivian shrieked, her voice rising, drawing uncomfortable glances from other patrons. That's an insult. I'm your daughter. I'll sue you, Mom. I'll take everything. I'll prove you're unstable, that you're just a bitter old woman abandoning her family because of some imagined slight. You will regret this, Mom, I promise you. Eleanor remained perfectly calm, her composure unshakable. She reached into her handbag and placed a small, discreet digital recorder on the table, its tiny red light blinking steadily. Vivian, before you make any further threats or baseless accusations, there are a few things you should know. Mr. Davison has meticulously documented every step of this process, every conversation, every decision. I've also undergone thorough medical evaluations, confirming my mental acuity, and as you can see, our entire conversation right now is being recorded. Everything you've just said, every threat, every accusation of my mental instability is now on record. Vivian stared at the recorder, her face draining of all color. The rage evaporated, replaced by a dawning, sickening realization. Her eyes widened, her mouth agape. You set me up, she hissed, her voice trembling with shock and disbelief. Eleanor met her gaze, her eyes reflecting a profound sadness, but no malice. No, Vivian, I didn't set you up. I protected myself and I protected Leo. I learned from your father's foresight and from your own actions. You left me no other choice. Vivian pushed back from the table, scraping her chair loudly across the floor. She grabbed her purse, her hands shaking. You're heartless, Mom. You're a cruel, vindictive old woman. You took everything. You took my house, you're taking my inheritance, and now you've even turned Arthur and Leo against me. I hate you. With those bitter words, she stormed out of the coffee shop, leaving a trail of stunned silence and a faint scent of desperation in her wake. Eleanor watched her go, a sigh escaping her lips. There was no sense of triumph, no satisfaction, only a profound, aching sadness for the broken relationship, for the daughter she had lost long before this final confrontation. The woman who had just left was a stranger, consumed by greed and entitlement, a stark contrast to the loving child she once nurtured. She sat for a long moment, the hum of the coffee shop slowly returning to her awareness. Just as she was about to gather her things, her phone vibrated. It was a text message from Arthur. "Leo wants to see you. Can you meet us at the park later?" A tiny glimmer of hope, fragile but persistent, flickered within Eleanor's heart. Perhaps not everything was lost. Later that afternoon, under the dappled sunlight of the neighborhood park, Eleanor met Arthur and Leo. Leo, her sweet grandson, ran to her, throwing his arms around her waist in a tight embrace. Eleanor hugged him back, burying her face in his soft hair, feeling a warmth she hadn't realized she'd missed so desperately. Arthur approached, his face weary but resolute. "Eleanor," he said, his voice quiet, "I wanted you to know. I filed for divorce this morning. I can't live like this anymore. For Leo's sake, if not my own." Eleanor simply nodded, her hand gently stroking Leo's hair. The journey had been painful, fraught with betrayal and heartbreak, but a new path was now opening, one illuminated by a renewed sense of purpose and the unwavering love of her grandson. The afternoon Eleanor spent with Arthur and Leo at the park was a balm to her soul. They threw a frisbee, shared stories, and for the first time in what felt like ages, Eleanor felt a lightness in her heart. Later, they continued their impromptu gathering at Eleanor's small apartment. Sipping hot chocolate, Leo enthusiastically declared was the best ever. Leo, a bright and observant boy, snuggled beside Eleanor on the sofa. "Grandma," he began, his voice soft, "can you tell me more about Grandpa Edward? Mom doesn't talk about him much." He then added with a child's unfiltered honesty, "And she lies about everything, doesn't she?" Eleanor's heart ached. The casual way Leo spoke of his mother's dishonesty was a painful testament to the environment he had been living in. She answered his questions about Edward, sharing fond memories, tales of his kindness and wisdom. As the evening drew to a close, Leo grew quiet again. "Grandma," he whispered, looking up at her with troubled eyes, "I heard Mom yelling on the phone the other day. She was talking about your money and how she was going to get it. She said she was going to tell people you were not well, so you couldn't keep it." Eleanor gently stroked his hair. She knew, of course, but hearing it from Leo, from the innocent perspective of her grandson, made it sting anew. The depth of Vivian's greed and willingness to harm her own mother for money was truly heartbreaking. The next morning, the fragile peace of Eleanor's apartment was shattered by a frantic pounding on her door. It was Vivian, her face contorted with anger and despair, her appearance even more disheveled than at their coffee meeting. She stormed in, bypassing any pleasantries. "You did this, didn't you, Mom?" Vivian shrieked, her voice high-pitched and accusatory. "You turned them against me. Arthur's gone. He's actually leaving. And Leo looks at me like I'm a monster. It's all your fault." Eleanor remained calm, her voice steady. "No, Vivian, I didn't turn them against you. Your choices did. Your lies, your hidden debts, your selfishness, and your decision to steal from Leo's future. These are the consequences of your own actions, not mine." Vivian crumpled onto a chair, tears streaming down her face. All anger drained from her, replaced by utter brokenness. "My life is falling apart, Mom," she sobbed, her voice raw. "Arthur's leaving. I have no money. The house is in foreclosure because I couldn't get that loan without your signature. I have nowhere to go. Please, Mom, just this once. Please help me financially. Just get me a lawyer for the divorce. Help me keep the house, please." Eleanor watched her daughter, a wave of profound sadness washing over her. For a fleeting second, the old instincts, the maternal desire to rescue her child stirred within her. But then she remembered Edward's wisdom, Beatrice's firm advice, and her own painful journey. Enabling Vivian would not help her. It would only perpetuate the cycle. "No, Vivian, Eleanor said, her voice soft but resolute. I won't enable you anymore. I've given you all I have to give, and you've squandered it. You need to face these consequences genuinely to ever hope for a better future. I've set up a trust for you with conditions. When you are ready to meet those conditions, when you are ready to truly help yourself, then there might be a path forward. But I cannot save you from yourself." Vivian's face contorted with fresh rage, her desperation curdling into fury. You selfish, cold-hearted woman. You've changed. You've completely turned your back on your own family. You're not my mother anymore." She launched into a torrent of abuse and threats, then stormed out of the apartment, slamming the door behind her with a final echoing crash. 6 months later, Eleanor sat with Mr. Davison, meticulously reviewing her finalized estate plan. "It's ironclad, Eleanor," he assured her, a genuine smile on his face. "Every contingency covered, every intention crystal clear." Eleanor was no longer just a resident of Golden Age senior living. She was a student at the local community college, pursuing a degree in art history, a lifelong dream she had deferred. Her classmates, many decades younger, respected her sharp intellect and thoughtful contributions. She was vibrant, engaged, and full of life. Her relationship with Arthur had deepened into a quiet, understanding friendship. He was navigating the complexities of his divorce, a difficult but necessary step towards his own future. Leo, however, was the true joy. Their bond had blossomed, a vibrant and loving connection. Eleanor spent countless hours with him, helping him with his science projects, taking him to museums, and simply listening to his eager questions about the world. He was excelling in school, his curiosity flourishing under her unwavering encouragement. And in a delightful, unexpected turn, Eleanor had found companionship. Richard, Beatrice's recently widowed brother-in-law, had found his way into her life. They shared quiet dinners, walks in the park, and a comfortable, easy camaraderie that warmed Eleanor's heart. Vivian's divorce was finalized a month ago. Arthur had informed Eleanor that Vivian, stripped of her safety nets, had finally entered therapy and, surprisingly, had begun attending Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, confronting her underlying issues. Just yesterday, Eleanor had received a text from Vivian. "Mom, I've been thinking. I'd like to talk. Really talk if you're open to it." Eleanor smiled, a genuine, peaceful smile, and tucked her phone away, knowing she would reply, but on her own terms, in her own time. She walked out onto her small balcony overlooking the community garden. The setting sun cast a golden glow, painting the sky with hues of orange and purple. She closed her eyes, inhaling the scent of blooming jasmine. She had lost a daughter, in a way, but she had found herself. She had reclaimed her life, her strength, and her freedom. Opening her eyes, she caught her reflection in the glass of the balcony door. The woman looking back at her was strong, resilient, and utterly at peace. Edward would have been proud. More importantly, Eleanor was proud of herself. She took out her phone. "Vivian," she typed, "I'm ready to listen when you're ready to talk. Coffee next week?"